Welcome to the Escape the Drift podcast. I am Dr. Jacob Egbert, and today's topic, empowering context. Now, I have 4 sections that I'm going to touch on today, and each of these are intertwined or synonymous or have similar meaning or intent. Now, to dive into this, I want to start by defining, or at least giving context to the term empowering context. Now, most of what I do in the Escape the Drift podcast is referencing principles and ideas and practices that relate to my philosophy on meditation. Now, meditation otherwise could be described as the practice of Zen, if you're looking into the Buddhist philosophy. It's essentially that practice of observing self, observing your experience in the now. And not only in the now, but, well, also, let me rewind that. Of course, in the now, because everything is the now. Even the past, even the future, resides in and exists in the now. Although often we perceive that the past is some elsewhere and that the future is a out there somewhere phenomenon. Although in reality it is a now. It's a now phenomenon because now is now and there's only now. And meditation, or the experience of observing the now, observing the self in the now, is the object of my pursuit. Now, in order to operate in what we would consider a linear or chronological fashion, and that is how our perception of life is structured. There was a time on some linear path where we existed, or the origin of our existence occurred, our birth, our conception, however you want to see that. And then as we age, we go down this linear path toward an ultimate end or death. And I like to speak on the awareness of that we will die and that there is an end to this existence in this now. Now, putting that into a linear perspective, that timeline of a then, a now, and a future, that allows for us to organize our thoughts and our pursuits as though there's a place to get to, as though there is an other location than the current location, and that there was a location that was different than the current location. And it's challenging to wrap your head around this, of course, and that is the pursuit of meditation and a lot of these practices where you focus on the experience at hand, or the now phenomenon. Now, in order to get into this from the perspective of an empowering context, I wanted to just lay out that the perception of, or the observing of, how things are gives you your experience in the now. So this may be high level on in some way. You really have to start to wrap your head around the thought of time and experience and perception and the ability to alter perception. And this is what my whole meditation course goes into, and it's involved. It's a 14-hour program that really dives into the inner workings of the mind, as well as how to alter your perception as it pertains to your experience of now. All right, let me just simplify this. Let me get into a little bit more specificity here. Your experience is a combination of your perception and reality. So there are things that occur, things that happen in reality, or are happening, or are. So for example, I'm in this room and the temperature is below a normal room temperature that we have set as like a 70 degree room temperature. It's probably 55 in here. So it occurs to me as cold. Now, my perception of that being cold is such that I say, good, I like that. I like the cold. Cold is good for me. And therefore, the what's so, the temperature being 55, and my perception of, good, I like that, creates an experience. And the experience is, I am in a cold room and I like it. Okay. Now, a way to alter my experience would be to change my perception, which would be 55 degrees is cold and uncomfortable and I hate it. It sucks. Now my experience is now sucks because I created it in perception of reality. Now, another way to change my experience would be to blast the heater, to raise the temperature to a degree that now my perception that previously or still thinks that 55 degrees is awful, now my perception is that 70 degrees is pleasant. So my experience has changed as a combination of my what's so, or the environment, and my perception, which is, do I like it or do I not like it? Do I describe it as bad or good? Okay. So that's the combination of reality or circumstance plus perception, or the way I see the world. Now, this is important in order to understand the empowering context. Now, an empowering context is something that I have adopted as a practice, creating an empowering context every single day, and often in multiple moments throughout the day. And that is this. An empowering context is my ability to alter or prescribe my perception of the way it is. So 55 degrees in this room, I choose to say, good, I like this. It keeps me fresh. I'm on my best performance because I'm sharp. I'm slightly whatever you want to call it. My body has to respond aggressively to maintain my vitality. Now, if it was 100 degrees in here, it'd be very warm in context with my normal 70 degree room temperature. And then I would say, good, I have the challenge of maintaining awareness because the high heat creates almost a sleepy or relaxed state. Okay, well, I could say, oh, it's awful, it's too hot, I'm uncomfortable, I'm starting to sweat. Either way, you can see that perception is what gives me my experience. Okay, clear. Now, context is the setting within which you act. So the room here is the context. The room is 55 degrees. That's the context. Now, creating it as empowering, as opposed to disempowering, is up to me. And that is my perception. And that frames my experience of the current context. Okay. So I have the ability to create empowering versus disempowering perception of the context. Now, power, let's just go back to that. So when I say empowering, what gives me power? Well, this definition that I've used for years is such. Power comes from that nothing is wrong and that I choose it. And we're going to get into this. When something is the way it is and I choose it to be the way it is, and I accept it and I like it and I want it and I embrace that is the way it is, I am in power. I have full power of the situation, of the context. It's mine. I own it in a way. Whereas if it is a way that I do not want it to be, oh, it should be warmer in here. Now I am disempowered. My power has been given to that it should be different than it is. Now, the should is anytime something is different than it is. It should be warm in here. And because it's not, I have feelings of upset. I don't like it. It's almost like I'm throwing a fit. I've become disempowered. I am no longer in charge. This is no longer my room. My room is warm, but this one is not. And therefore, I don't like it. I am disempowered. So, extrapolate this into your life in any context that you find yourself, and you can see that when things are not the way you think they should be, you have lost power. you're in a disempowering context. Now, when you choose, and this is what we're going to get into momentarily, the way it is, and you say, yes, good, to reference the Jocko Willink video that is wonderful. If you haven't seen it, Google Jocko Good, and you watch his little 2-minute video. It is brilliant. Essentially, at any circumstance that he finds himself in, he says, good. And it's just so perfect. That's like the perfect embodiment, or whatever you want to call presentation, of this context. So an empowering context, good. Now you're in power. Now it's yours. Now you've chosen it. You see it as a positive. And when you're on the other side of a positive, you're in power. Okay, so let's get into the details here. My meditation practice every day, I start with, the very first thing I write at the top of my page is empowering context, ... and then I create an empowering context. I'm just going to flip through my notebook I have here in front of me, and I'll just tell you the first empowering context that I see. Here's one. Each moment is new. Now, for me, when I say each moment is new, that is an empowering context. It's like, wow, every single moment is new. And new to me is fresh. It's opportunity. It's a blank slate. It's growth. It's a seed that can become. So to me, when I see that every moment is new, I feel empowered. That's the way it is. And it's beautiful. It's good. Okay. So that's an empowering context. Let me just flip through. I'll find another one. Empowering context. Everything is still, that's upside down. Everything is still available. Now, again, it's similar to everything is new, but everything is still available, meaning that to me, when I say that, when I speak, when I write down an empowering context, everything is still available. It means that opportunity exists. It's always available. There's always something more, something to do, somewhere to go, a path to walk. And to me, that's empowering. Whereas if I were to say, nothing is available, I'm shut down, I'm closed, the opportunity has ceased. So that's a disempowering context. And you could see the world that way if you choose to. There is what's so, and what's so is it's just a clean blank slate. Everything is new. Everything is available. And that's how I see it, and that's empowering. And therefore, an empowering context. And that gives me a being, a way to be, a way to feel, a resourceful state, something that I can act upon in order to move forward and pursue life, because I'm in power, I'm free. All right. So let me get into the choosing. Now, choosing is an act. It's an action. It's something that you have power to perform. You can choose anything. You have the opportunity in all situations to choose. Now, I want to go back and forth between these two words, voluntary and choosing. So there's this wonderful perception or perspective that you can adopt, and it is this, or an understanding. Let's say this. Let's back up a little bit. When you voluntarily go into a situation, your stress levels plummet. Whereas if you go into a situation involuntarily, you perceive it as being forced upon you. Now your stress levels go up. Now this is, there's experiments that have been done throughout time, whatever, the study of psychology and behavior, etc. When someone is put in a situation that they did not choose, that they did not go into voluntarily, their stress levels just go through the roof. Their cortisol levels spike, their tension goes up, their health drops, their immune systems tank. They have a physiologic response to that it is an involuntary setting or situation. They did not choose this. It should be different than it is. Whereas if they voluntarily go in, completely different experience. Now, here's an example. And I like this one because it's relative to everyone. It's relatable. If I come in and tell you where you're doing something wrong, I'm like criticizing you. You this, you that, you have a bad, you're bad at keeping your room clean. You're a mess. I'm criticizing you. I'm pointing out to you something that is not the way you want to hear it, of course. Now, that's uncomfortable when somebody criticizes you, when somebody points out your flaws or your shortcomings or your weaknesses. You feel uncomfortable because it's not voluntary. Someone's just putting upon you this description of your behaviors and negative. Whereas if you voluntarily look at yourself and you're like, you know what? I've put myself in a position where my room's a mess and I haven't kept up on my cleaning and my this or that. You're looking at it voluntarily and you see that as powerful because you're choosing to look at it. Whereas criticism comes as somebody's putting that on you and it's very uncomfortable. So it's an example of involuntary looking at versus a voluntary looking at. The same exact thing. If you were to walk into your bedroom and you're like, I'm going to spend 3 hours in here, flipping through your phone or organizing your shelves or laying down, taking a nap, whatever. Awesome. It could be an amazing experience. You're like, I'm just going to go chill in my room for 3 hours. Whereas if somebody put you in your room and locked the door and said, you cannot leave here for 3 hours, all of a sudden it becomes very uncomfortable, very stressful because you did not voluntarily go into that room. Somebody, an external force, put you in there against your will. Now, you could do the exact same things while you're in there for 3 hours. Let's say you're grounded, as a child, your parents put you in your room, scroll through your phone, organize the desk, take a nap, whatever, but the stress levels go through the roof because it's involuntary. So this is the idea of life in the world of choosing the way it is versus not choosing the way it is. And that's a perception. You're in your room for 3 hours regardless of whether or not someone told you to be in there against your will or you voluntarily walked in there. Everything within that room is the same. Every action is the same. The stress levels, completely different because of perception of the what's so. Now, similarly, back to the criticism. You're a mess. Well, someone telling you that you're a mess and you didn't want to look at it, very stressful. Whereas in a moment of contemplation and you're looking at it, you're like, wow, I'm a mess. Dramatically different. One feels powerful because you own it, whereas the other is disempowering because it's not the way it should be in some way. Okay, so the other element of all of this is the should element, and I talk about this regularly. Should is like the thief of joy, the thief of happiness, the thief of peace. Anytime there is a should, you lose your power. The car breaks down. It shouldn't have broken down. Whereas if you take the Jocko Willink approach, the car broke down. Good. I choose this. There's an opportunity for me to see how I can behave in a moment of upset. This is not the way that I intended it. The car is broken on the side of the road. Well, let's see what I can do. How quickly can I change this tire? Or who do I know that I can reach out to for assistance? And how can I create this to be a benefit to me? Now you've chosen it. It's voluntary, essentially. It's what's so. Choose it. Go in voluntary to the solution or the problem solving, whatever you want to call it. Whereas the complaining or the it shouldn't be this way or the oh no, the reaction of I don't like this takes away your power and changes your experience because your perception is negative. Okay, I think this is clear. Now, I want to get into, I started this, I mentioned briefly Zen. Now, Zen, in the world of Buddhism, if you translate the word Zen, essentially it comes down to meaning contemplation or absorption or meditation. Now, what the point of this is, the enlightenment, the Zen, the Buddhist person who, I guess you could say, has mastered the art of Zen, is the one who brings everything to the now in this very moment and has no opinion, or let me say that differently. That's not it. It's taken away all of the desires for it to be different than it is. It's essentially an empowering context. Zen, the meditation, the observing of the now, and choosing it to be as is essentially enlightenment. It is essentially that Zen moment of meditation, of being now, so now that the way it is doesn't even affect you, other than you have the opportunity to choose to create it as a positive. It's up to you. But essentially, desire. Where does the, I guess, mechanics of desire play into your experience? Now, I've heard this in context of describing Zen, and it is this. Desire, whether to want something to be different than it is, or wanting something to stay the way it is, both result in suffering. And suffering, you suffer any time you want something different than it is. And this goes back to everything we've just talked about. If you voluntarily look at your messiness, if you voluntarily go into that room for 3 hours, there's no suffering. Suffering comes only when you want it to be different than it is. So you can be at a party and having the time of your life and suffering because you don't want it to end. You're focusing on the finite nature of the now, and you lament that down the road it will end. You've entered a little element of suffering into that moment of joy and bliss, whereas if you were in the moment and you just enjoyed the way it is, you choose it as is and no thought or desire for it to be any different than it is, down the road, in the future, whatever you want to call it. That is where suffering comes in. Anytime you want things different than they are. Now, bringing in the word should. Anytime you're using the word should, you add an element of suffering. It shouldn't be this way. Suffer. Choosing it the way it is eliminates suffering. Good. This is the way it is. Good. Now, there's a practical component here. Let me get into this. So first of all, I want to go back to the practice of setting an empowering context. And this is easy to do at any moment. You simply choose the way it is, and you can frame it in a way of positivity. Good. It's 55 degrees in here. I love it. This is exactly how I want it to be. Okay. Now you can frame or create that empowering context, which sets you up for success. You're powerful. It's a moment where you can act. And this is the key point here. Once you've set an empowering context and you've chosen the way it is, good. The car broke down. Good. Your resourceful state becomes one of action and positivity and choice. You can do whatever you want. Now is yours. And when it's yours, you're not out of effect, you're not a victim, you're not under the gun, you're not behind, you're not somehow below or less than in the moment. You have pure choice. One, you choose the way you see it and the way you feel in the moment. And then two, you have the opportunity to take action. Now, if 55 degrees, I'm like, good, it's 55 degrees. I'm going to turn the heater on because I can, and I like the idea of a future where it's warmer. Awesome. I can do that. So I'm pleased with, I am empowered by that it's cold or that I perceive it to be cold. It's 55 degrees. Awesome. I can turn the heat on. Click. 20 minutes later, it's 70. Great. And in that 20 minutes of while it's warming up, the whole time I've chosen it. I voluntarily have it be 55 and I voluntarily will have it be 72. Now, if I complain, I'm like, oh, it's 55 degrees, it sucks. Fine, I'm going to turn the heater on. Same actions, everything's the same except I have a negative taste in my mouth. And that 20 minutes until it's warm, I'm like, no, finally it's good. Do you see there's a difference there? So anytime there's a should that pops up, you don't have to see it as a should. You could see it as a could. And I use this interchange of words all the time. It's 55 degrees in here. Good. It could be warmer. Let's take action to make it so. Click. 55. Now it's going to be 70. Awesome. and it's awesome all the way through. I might need to get a jacket on. That would help my experience a little bit. I'm like, I'm going to put a jacket on. Cool. Glad I have one. Whatever it is. And so that's life. That is every situation that you find yourself in. If you can eliminate the should and exchange it with a could, if you choose and voluntarily look at the way things are, if you sit down and enjoy the now in such a way that you feel empowered, that there is no way that it should be in this moment, because there is only the way it is. And you can't change the way it is now. You can put things in action to alter the way it will be. Awesome. That's the whole point of life and growth and progress, is to assess the now, look at it from an empowered context, put yourself in a resourceful state. Resourceful meaning I have the ability to add to or create or build or whatever, take action, and then you go take action. So hopefully here's my intention. I'm not going to hope anything. Here's my intention for this particular episode. I want to point out to you and give to you this perception that I've learned through my own experiences, people's words, things that I've experienced myself, things that I've done radically over and over and over, and just shifted my experience of myself in life through creating an empowering context. And in any moment, I can create an empowering context. Somebody asks me how I'm doing. Awesome. That's an empowering context. I just created it. There's what's so, the way my body feels, the way my finances are, the way my relationship's going. Everything around me is the circumstance. And I choose my perception. And my perception is awesome, amazing, perfect, great. Now my experience has now been elevated, and I'm empowered, and I'm in a resourceful state, and I can take action. So my intention is that you have the opportunity to look at this, to sit down and meditate on the now, the observation of who you are, your experience of your circumstances. What is your perception, and can you add an empowering context to your life, to your moment-to-moment experience? And it takes only the one thing, choosing, voluntarily looking at and saying, this is what I choose. Now you've eliminated the should, because it is the way it is, and you've chosen it as it is. And from there, you can add to and create positivity. You can say good. Good is an additive. There is what's so, and that's just what's so, and it's not changing in the moment, in the now. And then there's what you add to it, the story about, the description, the perception. Good. Good it's not actually good. It's not actually bad. It's none of those things. It's simply the way it is. 55 degrees. It's 55 degrees. Good. Well, no, it's not actually good. Bad. No, it's not actually bad. It's 55 degrees, period. How I perceive it, and I'm just doing this redundantly, how I perceive it gives me my experience. Okay. That is what I wanted to share. My intention to share an empowering context with you. This has been an amazing podcast, and you are going to have an amazing day if you so choose. This is the Escape the Drift podcast, and I am Dr. Jacob Egbert.